Orion Taraban is a clinical psychologist and runs the wildly popular YouTube channel Psych. In this interview, we touch on some hot button dating topics, including cheating, ultimatums, and power in relationships. A lot of people nowadays complain about not being able to find someone who is worthy of dating in terms of serious relationships. Where should people go to find a partner?
Yeah, I hear that a lot. I hear that both on the men's side and on the women's side. I actually have an episode that's coming out. It's called How to Meet Women. There are really only 4 places to meet women in today's day and age. There are dating apps, cold approach, social circle, and social media. And I rank those 4 ways in that order because they go from the fastest, easiest, hardest way, like the least successful way, to the most time-consuming, difficult, highest success rate way. You can spin up a dating app in 30 minutes. It costs nothing. You want the premium, you throw a few bucks at it, and suddenly you get access to thousands of singles in your area, but the success rate with dating apps is very low. On the other hand, you move in the direction towards social media. You can get a following of a few 100,000 or a few million on certain platforms, and suddenly it's like a nonstop funnel of interest towards you. The script is flipped, especially as a guy, but it can take many years to develop that kind of platform or stage for women to find you. So it's a much higher success rate. There's nothing that works better in today's day and age than social media game, but it takes a long time to cultivate that.
Mm-hmm. And then what are your thoughts about meeting people online versus meeting people in person?
Well, that's the social circle game. So social circle is like dating at work, dating within your church, dating within your friend group. It's kind of how it always used to be, the only way that you could meet people in real life, right? And there are definitely pros and cons to that approach, as there are to all the other 3 approaches as well. The pros to that approach tend to be that you kind of know what you're getting into. You have an opportunity to know in real life that, wow, I'm actually attracted to this person as opposed to just photographs online. Oftentimes there's some sort of pretext, either as coworkers or friends or fellow community members, to interact with them in a non-dating, non-sexual way. So you get a chance to examine their personality, to know if they're fun, they're smart, they're interesting, maybe you have similar values. So it allows you to vet without ever having to actually date. One of the liabilities of this approach is you really do want to be right before you transition out of a coworker or a fellow congregant role into a romantic relationship, because the consequences of being wrong, well, you're probably not going to quit that job, but maybe they're going to gossip. You might have to show up every day and see that person and be reminded of that awkward interaction. So you need to be really clear that the other person's kind of more or less attracted to you and on the same page. But you can vet more slowly, and those relationships often have a high likelihood of success in the long term. Another liability of that approach, however, is you really are limited with respect to available supply. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, you can date within your church, but there might only be 3 age-appropriate people for you to date. And you might not want to put your mouth on any one of those 3, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's how it used to be. It's like, yeah, there were 2 maids in the village for you to choose from, and you had to choose one in order to survive the winter on some level. So we have dispensed with necessity. We've created enormous optionality and abundance, which has come with its own problems, of course. But I'd rather err on the side of having more options and greater selection to find a better fit than having to make do with whatever happens to be available in whatever area I find myself in.
Yeah, I think that's something that ties back to our last conversation where we talked about the challenges that people face in terms of actually finding someone who is a good match for you, and how you would have to vet a person, and how that ultimately really narrows down the pool, especially once you start applying criteria for what you expect in a person.
Well, that's a big part of it. So I think another reason why it's so hard for men and women, and I think women are more guilty of this than men, to be honest, is that what they're looking for, their criteria in a potential partner, there's just too many things. There's just too many things. And one of the things that I've learned both personally and professionally to make it more likely to have a satisfying romantic relationship is only ask of your partner to do a couple of things in your life. Mm-hmm. And if possible, get all the other emotional, psychological, and relational needs met in other relationships in your life, which is basically how human beings have evolved to live in small tribes or communities, in multi-generational family houses, with lots of soft relationships that they engaged with on a daily basis. For so many people, especially post-COVID, they work at home, they live in fragmented nuclear families. The only person they see every day is their partner or their spouse. And so now this person is your best friend and your chef and your life coach and your therapist and your cheerleader and your mistress and your confidant. And it's like, wow, that's a lot of roles for one person to play. And just like a chain is as strong as its weakest link, sometimes people will throw out otherwise good relationships when the partner fails in any one of those roles. And I think that's unfair. I don't think anybody can wear that many hats successfully. So I think it's a good idea to only want a few things, be very conscious about what you're going to a relationship to fulfill, and try to get your needs met elsewhere. It takes the pressure off the other person. Makes it less likely that they're going to fail too.
Yeah. And then in terms of actually finding someone, as you said, we run into the problem of limited availability in some of these methods for meeting people.
Sure.
So in terms of cold approach, what are your thoughts on that?
Cold approach, again, has its pros and cons. I do think that it's very useful for a man to feel like he can do that. Like it's fantastic for his confidence and his self-esteem to have the felt sense of success that I can go out and make something happen if I need to. Like I can approach a woman, I can engage her emotions, I can have a conversation, and I can successfully, if I choose to, direct the interaction in the direction of a sexual encounter. That does wonders for a man's confidence, and that's a virtuous cycle. The more confident he becomes, the more likely he's going to be successful in that approach. Again, one of the liabilities is cold approach can take a long time to get good at. It's a skill, and you have to suffer through a great deal of rejection. It's kind of like becoming a master telemarketer, I would think. It's like, how many times are you going to get hung up on? How many times are you going to get yelled at? How many times are you just going to be told no, 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 and have the door slammed in your face? Like, you have to get through that period of suck in order to develop any kind of mastery in any skill set. The issue is that's a pretty hard cliff for a lot of guys, and so they just shy away from ever mastering that skill, or even worse, they just do it here and there, and so they don't get in enough reps, and all they get is negative feedback, and that really spoils their perception of women and the dating pool in general. It's also useful because, unlike some of the other methods, in cold approach, the biggest pro that you have is she's right fucking there. You're in the same place at the same time, and you have access to that woman. That woman might be too attractive to be on a dating app. She might have millions of followers on Instagram, and she doesn't receive DMs, or you're going to get lost in her DMs anyway. You might not circulate in the same friend group otherwise, but here, for whatever reason, you're at the Dodgers game, you're at the right bar. It's like, that woman is right there. You can shoot your shot. So that is why it's useful to have the skill of cold approach, because it allows you to take advantage of opportunities that you might not otherwise have in the other methods of meeting women.
Yeah, I think it's a huge advantage for men to have experienced that, rejection and be able to develop that skill set. I think that ultimately they're building skills that will later apply in all their relationships later on as well. Like it's a skill set that is applicable, even in that you can extrapolate into relationship type scenarios.
It's good for men to eat shit a little bit, to develop that emotional callus, and to know that rejection really isn't all that painful, and it really isn't the end of the world. And once you take the sting out of no, of loss or rejection, you're much more socially free to be yourself in a relationship or out of a relationship.
Yeah, I think that another thing that men get out of meeting people in person is that the woman is your mirror. When you approach someone and you say something and you say something dumb, you're going to get a very immediate reaction.
It's true.
And you're going to learn from that. If you go out and maybe your style is off, maybe you're not in shape, you're going to get responses that reflect that. And I think that ultimately it is a crucible for self-improvement.
You will get real-time feedback. But one thing that's important to remember is that woman just met you 3 minutes ago, 30 seconds ago. It's not personal. She's responding to the most superficial, visible cues that you're signaling, right? Which is like marketing, branding. These are really, really, really important concepts. You could have the best product in the world, but if it isn't marketed correctly, if it doesn't have an attractive brand, no one is going to buy it. Like, there's much research and money gets into the label on a beverage than the liquid inside, for good reason, right? So you do get real-time feedback from women, but not really about your abiding personality traits. It's not about how good you are as a man or how kind you are or strong you are. It has to do with, like, did that joke land? Was she willing to talk to you after she gave you the once over? You know? So it does give you feedback of a marketing or a branding sort.
One downside that people talk about in terms of meeting people in person is that in order to get that accessibility or that volume, you're talking to certain types of people or a certain cross section of the population. Let's say if you're at bars or clubs, which is like the stereotypical way people will meet people, strangers.
Yeah.
Where would you recommend people go to actually meet people in person that would be compatible with them?
Maybe the Whole Foods, something like that. And I think a lot of people do get picked up at the Whole Foods. It's tricky. I wouldn't go to a library. No one is really there to engage in that kind of interaction. One of the benefits of going to a meat market bar on a Friday night is you can be reasonably assured that the people inside of them are looking to engage. They're looking to mingle. They might not be looking to mingle with you, but at least they're there for a reason. They chose to put their body in that place and not anywhere else on a Friday night. The stakes are lower because you can be more assured that they are likely looking for the same thing. Another liability about cold approach is, I kind of alluded to it earlier, in order to get good at it, you have to put in a lot of reps. And that can create a callousness around women and dating. It becomes mechanical. It becomes like a system because, let's be honest, certain things tend to work. Over hundreds or thousands of repetitions, you begin to optimize for those things. I've also seen that sometimes people can get just sort of lost in the game, like picking up for the sake of picking up. I've talked to guys, they don't even like the girls that they're picking up. They're not even attracted to the girls, but they feel like they have to keep playing the game. Like the game is now playing them in some cases. But that's an extreme example. Most guys won't get there.
And then in terms of talking about actually screening people that you might meet, I think that the selection phase is really important, and
Sure.
It really dictates a lot of the success or failure of relationships. If a guy is potentially dating a girl, does her relationship history matter?
Yeah, to a certain extent, it does. I have an episode that's coming out soon, maybe it's already out, called Her Narcissistic Ex. And it seems like in today's day and age, every woman has a narcissistic ex, some gaslighting, arrogant, personality disordered former boyfriend, which is shocking because according to the official epidemiological data, 2% of the American population has NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, and that includes both men and women. So how 2% or like 1% of the population is having sex with 50% of the population seems unusual, right? I talk about why that might be a red flag that a woman has a narcissistic ex, or certainly multiple personality disordered, toxic, disastrous relationships in her past. I mean, she's likely contributing to that issue in a way that she might not even be willing to recognize. But it's rare for lightning to keep striking the same place over and over again, as it were. If it keeps happening in many relationships, at that level, you have to realize that you're the common denominator. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily that you're responsible, that you're a bad person, but you might be doing things to attract that kind of dynamic into your intimate circle. The issue with putting too much stock in a woman's relationship history is that women will treat men radically different depending on how attracted they are to them. So just because a woman has been in one long-term relationship before you met her, you might think, oh, she's got a low body count. She's a stable girl because her relationship history, she's just got one. She's not just sleeping around. That doesn't necessarily mean that she wants a long-term relationship with you. Mm-hmm. She might not want any relationship with you. She might think that you're really cute, but that you don't have some of the signals to be a good long-term prospect, right? And women will just hook up for the sake of hooking up, just like men do. You have to be pretty hot as a guy to be the target of that, either hot or famous, but women will do that as well. But the idea is to think, oh, she's done this in the past, therefore she's going to do that with me. Not necessarily. It really boils down to the woman's level of attraction for the person that she's dealing with. I mean, that's why most people have had the experience or know somebody who's had the experience that they've dated somebody for years. Maybe the man in question was interested in getting married or moving things along, and the woman was like, oh, I don't really know yet. I don't think I'm ready. They break up, and then like 3 months later, she gets engaged to some other dude. It's like she was ready. She just wasn't ready with that guy because she had her misgivings or her attraction level wasn't high enough.
Do you think that someone's past relationships can skew their expectations in a way that can damage their future relationships?
Well, yeah, sure. Absolutely. I mean, we only have a limited amount of experiences. Most people have only had a few relationships in their lives by the time they get to even like 30 years old. That's subject to the law of small numbers. I mean, if I just randomly chose 5 people off the streets of Los Angeles and had a conversation with them or had a relationship with them, what kind of data would that give me about what to expect from the 6th? I don't think very good or reliable data. There's so many different kinds of people in Los Angeles. So even if I talk to 5 radically different people, it doesn't necessarily mean the 6th is going to be a chimeric conglomeration of aspects of the 5, but that's what I'm going to expect just because I haven't sampled sufficiently. That should make sense to you as a doctor, right? Mm-hmm. So I think humans can't avoid it. We are pattern recognition machines. We are meaning-making machines. And we're always trying to predict the future in order to be safe and to secure our desired outcomes. And we're going to make those predictions based on our past experiences. And for better or for worse, if we've only had a couple of past experiences, whether they're good or bad or indifferent, that is going to inappropriately give us confidence in what to expect next. I remember in my 20s, I wasn't doing so good in my relationships, and I called up my dad and I was complaining about it. And I had fallen into self-pity, and I was like, Dad, I think maybe I'm just not lovable. I don't know if it's ever going to happen for me. I was like 23. And he was like, Orion, how many women have you dated? Like, it happens every time, Dad. It happens every time. Yeah, but how many times? It happened 3 times. He's like, it happened 3 times? Like, that's nothing. I mean, 3 was a lot for me because that was my entire relationship history at that time. But he was absolutely right. 3 is nothing. You can't collect samples from 3 participants and run a statistical analysis and get any kind of good power out of that. You wouldn't get any kind of results that you could have confidence in, right? And that's sort of the trap. So if you need diverse, varied, large sampling in order to get an accurate view of the population you're dealing with, but at the same time, you're punished and judged for having multitudinous, diverse relationship partners or experience, well, that seems like a double bind. So either you have to be willing to deal with the judgments of having a large sample size, and maybe you actually get an accurate idea of what men or women want, or you forgo that, but you run the risk of making decisions based on your small sample size. I don't think there's a way around that.
Have you heard of the secretary problem?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So for the people who haven't heard, this is basically a theoretical idea where if you're trying to hire a secretary, let's say you're going to be interviewing people, say 1 at a time. And the idea is that if you could only interview people 1 at a time and you can't go back, after how many or in what range of numbers should you be stopping and saying like, okay, let's hire this person, assuming that you don't know what's going to come next and you want to hire the best person. And I think they ran some simulations and the ideal number was like somewhere in the 30s.
Oh, that's higher than I expected. I remember it being in the 20s, but yeah, that's absolutely correct. Like you shouldn't have to interview every single applicant. Let's say you have 100 people and you interview 99 of them. What's the likelihood that the last person that you haven't interviewed is going to be better than all the 99 people that you have? Very, very, very low. Not 0, but very, very, very low. And so it's like you play with statistics and so you get to the point, at what point is further interview not creating statistically significant differences in my selecting the best out of that 100? And I guess it's in the 30s.
Yeah. So anyways, that was basically the simulation run where they just fed a machine like a line of numbers and said, okay, you can just look at each number and then give us a decision at a certain point of your best estimate that this is probably going to be the best that we're going to get.
Yeah.
But the difficulty when you apply that model to actual relationships or in a dating context is that relationships take time. And it's obviously confounded a lot by other factors like your own self-development, particularly for men, I think, who take time to develop. And people have different windows in terms of their dating years, but I mean, you're not going to have time to have 30 long-term relationships, for
Unless you do them
example,
simultaneously.
Then it just takes a few months.
And I talk about it in the book. It's like you can do it consecutively, or you can do it simultaneously, or you can do it both. And let's leave aside all of our moral and judgments about the way relationships are supposed to go. But let's say that you were dating 5 women at once for a year. Okay, that's a decent medium-term relationship. It's clearly not a one-night stand. It's not a long-term partnership. But you got 5 years of relationship experience in one with 5 different types of women. Now you do that in 10 years, you can get 50 years of relationship experience with 50 different women by the time you're 30. Like, that is a force multiplier when it comes to the ability to know how to have relationships, how to communicate with women, how to hold frame, et cetera, et cetera. But we don't teach men to do that. But it might be in their best interest to do that.
Mm-hmm. I guess my question is, the model basically is saying that you need a certain number of candidates that you've interviewed until you have an idea of what you're worth or what you can get, and then be able to predict what's coming. In terms of people, how many people do you think someone might need to date to have that idea?
Well, yeah. So the secretary problem, the number probably changes depending on the closed sample. So maybe that's why I thought it was in the 20s and you thought it was in the 30s. If we were only interviewing 10 applicants, then obviously we wouldn't interview 20 or 30, but we shouldn't have to interview all 10, right? We should only have to interview 6, maybe even less. But when it comes to the dating pool, we're dealing with a functionally limitless sample size, right? It's not a sample anymore, it's a population. And you can't sample a population. You can only sample a sample. But we're not constrained by the sample, we're constrained by time.
Yep.
So I do think that that's one of the dangers of dating apps, is that you have a seemingly limitless supply of possible relationship partners. And within that sea, there's going to be a more attractive option that's better for you than whatever you're currently dealing with. I guarantee it. There's someone, no matter who you are, there's someone out there that's better for you. Like, the likelihood that you've dated 10 people in a world with 4.5 billion individuals, the opposite sex, and you happen to find the absolute optimal person for you is very, very low. So there is someone better out there for everybody, but like, on what timeline are you going to find that person, and how much better are we talking about? This is the trap that optimizers or perfectionists of all sorts fall into. And I do think, as a perfectionist in recovery, that at a certain point, optimization isn't optimal, because the amount of time, energy, and money you're spending to make it outweighs the small returns on investment that effort is creating. So I think that once you get to about 85%, I think that's around the magic number for me of what you're looking for, then it's going to take more time, more energy, more money to get it up to 87 than it's likely worth. Because the difference between getting 87% of what you want and 85% of what you want is marginal. But you might have to spend a lot of time and effort just creating a slightly better option for yourself. And I don't think that's worth it. I think everyone has the right to say, no, I want to get all the things that I want, or this isn't good enough. Fair enough. But an 85% solution is pretty good for the vast majority of people.
Yeah. And I think it also comes with an interplay with the interaction that you actually have with that person. Like, how good is the relationship that you're getting? And that brings up another topic that you've spoken about.
Oh, one more thing before we move on. It's difficult because not only, given the things that we discussed, but you mentioned sexual marketplace value, but sexual marketplace value changes as a function of time, and it changes differentially for men and women. So you talked about how getting out there and having relationships can teach you on some level what your SMV is. That's true. You can't decide for yourself what your SMV is. The market decides what the SMV is. Your customers decide how much your product is worth. You can't dictate the price tag. But SMV can change, and it does change over time. It doesn't remain static for either men or women. Some people's SMV estimates are out of date. Sometimes they're too high, sometimes they're too low, but they're operating under bad self-knowledge, and that's detrimentally affecting their ability to get what they want in the sexual marketplace today.
Yeah, I think that's actually particularly tricky for men because, as you said, maybe you could amass a lot of relationship experience in your 20s, but for most men, when you're in your 20s, you're the bottom of the heap. And it's not until later when things really shape up. So maybe you have a large sample size of knowledge of women treating you poorly or not getting what you want. And then you finally get one that is like, says yes or treats you better. And then you just jump on it.
Sure. I mean, you haven't eaten in a long time, so even cherry tomatoes taste good. But even leaving aside the dating mechanics of this, now we're getting into psychology, scripts, and therapy. It's like I know some guys who are wildly successful. Maybe they're doctors. They're making 6, sometimes 7 figures a year. They're attractive. They're in the prime of their lives. But they still have this high school mentality where it's like, I was a nerd and no girl would go out with me. It's like, dude, that was 25 years ago. You need to update your browser. You are now in a very different stage of life. But because he is still operating with the 17-year-old beta's script in his mind, he is going to act that way with women. So even if those women initially start to respond to his positive reproductive cues, oh, he's tall, he's handsome, he's rich, he's got good genes, he's looking to settle down, which he might be. Wow. Over time, that man might blow that relationship. And he's going to blow that relationship usually by acting in unattractive ways, which are going to decrease the woman's authentic desire to remain in that relationship, because he's acting like a 17-year-old beta, because that's what he is on the inside. Mm-hmm. But it takes the women a while to figure that out.
Talking about the actual interaction and the quality of the relationship you have with someone, you've talked about the concept of the adored versus the adorer. Yeah. Could you touch on that?
Sure. I have this idea of the balance of attraction, which is that two people can't ever like each other exactly the same amount. So in any relationship, one person always likes the other person more, and one person always likes the other person less. And I call the person who likes the other person more the adorer, and the other person the adored. And this can change. In the beginning, it can change polarity, but usually as relationships go on, they settle into more or less a stasis, and the gap doesn't fluctuate wildly anymore. People settle into the roles that they're more comfortable with and the gap in attraction that they're more comfortable with. So that's introducing the concept. Was that your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So who fits better into which role for men and women?
Yeah. I mean, I do think that there's individual differences. I do think that in general, both men and women prefer to be adorers, which is the opposite of what most people expect. Most people want to be down here because the person down here gets to be with the one they love. And that's what everyone is looking for in the sexual marketplace. They're hunting. They want to get what they want. And only this person, the one at the bottom, the adorer, gets to have that. This person doesn't get to be with the one they love. They get to be loved by the one they're with. And if they're not careful, they might actually be adoring somebody up here that they're not in a relationship, or maybe they were in a relationship in the past. Now, the reason why most people want to be the adorer, despite being the more powerless partner relatively in that relationship, is because the adorer gets to feel all the emotions. And that's men and women. They want to go into a relationship to feel. And for better or for worse, people use their emotions usually as the primary guide as to whether a relationship works for them. They feel something. I mean, how many men and women have said, this person is great on paper. They're very sweet. They're very loyal. They're kind. They make a lot of money. I know that they're attractive. I just don't feel anything for them. It's like, well, what else are you looking for? They want the feeling, and they're willing to throw all that other good stuff away because they feel nothing. And it could be they feel nothing because they're here in the relationship dynamic. They're the adored, and that's not where they prefer to be. That's missing out on, let's say, the romantic adventure of relationships, which is to get the one that you want. So I do think that in general, though there are exceptions to every rule, it's better for the woman to be the adorer and the man to be the adored, for along the lines that I just discussed, which is men and women like to feel in their relationships, but it's more important for the women. It's way more important. When a woman doesn't feel anything for a man anymore, she's generally looking for the door. It's better for the woman to hate the man or to be angry at the man than to feel nothing for him. It's not great for the man either, but I think the man will stick it out longer just out of a sense of duty or commitment. I think that most women aren't going to fall on that sword. They're going to be like, life's too short. I'm not feeling this anymore. There's probably better options out there for me. I'm out. Men can do the same, but I think it's more likely with women. So I think that because being in the position of the adorer gives you more access to emotional experience, it's better for the woman to be there. But it's actually not better to be up here or worse and better here and worse up here. There are pros and cons to each position, but you can't have everything. One of the issues is that people want the privileges of both places and neither one of the liabilities. They want the pros of both and the cons of neither, and that's just not possible. Like, they want to have all of the emotional experience and the love and the infatuation that the adorer gets to access, but they also want to be in charge. They want to have the power and the control. It's like part of having that emotion is you surrender control. Like, love is kind of like a roller coaster. You strap yourself in and you surrender control for as long as you're on the ride. That's part of the fun. It's like you can't tickle yourself. You can't do it. So it's like, it's not fun to try to tickle yourself. You have to kind of surrender control to somebody else to be sensitive enough to access that kind of sensitivity or stimulation. So you can't have the feels and be in control at the same time. Doesn't work that way. But a lot of people want both. Mm-hmm. And that's tricky because over time, I've seen that women tend to become the more powerful person in their relationships. It doesn't always start that way. Men generally start as the more powerful, and then they often cede that control of the relationship through small concessions over long periods of time to the woman. And then the woman, over some years, ends up in the more dominant, powerful role, which flips the initial polarity of the attraction, and she realizes, wow, I'm doing everything around here. I'm in charge. I don't feel anything for this person anymore. Why do I don't need to be a mommy to some little man child. I'm out of here. But she kind of created that dynamic. And of course, the man allowed that as well. And that's a big reason why that happens is because men don't really have a plan. They don't have a plan past getting laid, at least. It's like most people, they didn't think they'd ever get this far, you know? So it's like I thought about what I was going to do up until this point, and then that's good enough for me. Like, I'm happy just seeing you every once in a while and sleeping together and having a good time. That's a lot of men's plan, especially when they're young. Women have a plan. Like, it's been a few months, so like, what are we? And it's been a year, so I think that we should take the next step. And what are your thoughts about children? And here's 3 wedding venues that I researched. Which one would you like? Mm-hmm. And they have the schedule, and men more or less tend to be a little bit more easygoing, and they're just like, oh, okay. Or they have fear and scarcity mentality because the woman basically gives an ultimatum and threatens the basis of the relationship if the man doesn't accede to her requests or demands, depending on, how far along they are. And so the woman assumes more and more control just because she has a plan. But in general, in life, not just in relationships, if you don't have a plan, you're part of somebody else's plan. Like, you cannot be planless. You're just a cog in somebody else's machine. So it is really important, I think, for men to be very clear what they want with respect to their relationships with women, and that will allow them to maintain frame, which will allow them to stay in the adored role, which might actually be in the best interests of the sustainability of that relationship. Because again, once the polarity shifts, it's very difficult for a lot of women to stay there. Mm-hmm. They're like, I'm doing everything, I'm getting nothing in return. This is bullshit. It's like, well, yeah.
I think a dynamic that's challenging for a lot of men is that we, as you said, we want to get the girl we want and have the relationship that we want. Mm-hmm. And those two things are very difficult to have coexisting perfectly. And often, as you said, one person will like the other person more. And if you want a girl to treat you in a certain way, that probably means that you're in the adored position. If she's, adoring you, chasing after you, or giving you more power, a lot of guys want that feeling. But often what that entails is that you're not quite getting the girl that you really would have seen as the best or the one that you like the most. So there is some trade-off there.
Sure.
How should guys balance that trade-off?
Yeah, I made an episode about that. It's called Winning to Lose, where I talk about how, and this happens to both men and women, but I'll answer the question for men in a minute. It's very rare to get the relationship that you want with the person you want to have it with. And the party that more or less gets to decide explicitly or implicitly what the terms of the relationship will be is the more powerful person, which could be the man or it could be the woman, because there are different forms of power that are seen as attractive by the opposite sex in the context of a romantic relationship. Really beautiful women are extremely powerful. Like, they can pretty much dictate terms. And if you aren't willing to play ball, they're entirely confident that there's some man out there who will, and they are correct. So if you're dealing with an extremely beautiful woman with lots of options, most likely the cost of doing business and having, securing that woman is you might have to cede some control over the terms of the relationship. And it goes the opposite when a woman gets involved with a very high status, very wealthy or famous man. That's the man who has lots of options, just like the very beautiful woman has lots of options. He knows that if he doesn't get what he wants from this particular woman, there's probably a woman out there who will give him what he wants. And so he's probably not going to make a lot of concessions. So when women are targeting those top 1-2% men, which so many of them do, it's like the top 50% of women are trying to get with the top 5% of men. It's ridiculous. The cost of doing business, the cost of securing that guy is they might have to make concessions with respect to the terms of the relationship. Like, you can't have it both ways. So the question was for men. Yeah, I think that in general, I err on the side if there's a choice between the relationship I want or the person I want, I choose the relationship, because otherwise I'm winning to lose. Like, I might get that initial euphoria of getting the one that I want. Maybe there's an ego boost whenever I go out in public and I walk in with the dime piece on my arm, right? But behind the scenes, over time, I've given up too much to make the compromise worth it for me personally. So the danger is that people say, I want this type of relationship with that particular person. I think it's better to say, I want this type of relationship, and talk to lots of different people and say, this is the type of relationship that I want. And a lot of women are going to go running to the hills. They're not going to be interested. But put yourself in front of enough women, especially if you're a high value, attractive man, say, this is the type of relationship that I want. I'm not going to compromise on this. And I guarantee before too long, there's going to be women who are going to be like, oh, that sounds good to me. And they're going to self-select in. So I call that approach fishing as opposed to hunting. Hunting is where, like, I want that buck, and I'm gunning for that one. Yeah. I got my laser focus. Fishing, you cast a wide net and you haul up a bunch of fish, and then you choose the tastiest morsels. And I guarantee if you bring in a big catch, there's going to be some really delightful fishes that you've hauled on shore, and they want what you want. That's why they're in your net. And then that's your best chance as a man of getting the type of relationship you want with the person that you want it with. You actually put the relationship first.
Something I've been thinking about in this regard is that there's some scale to this. Like, if you could boil this down to like a point system, not to objectify anyone in any way, but let's say we're talking about people as on a scale of 0 to 10. And let's say a person is, say, like a guy is at 8 out of 10. And if he meets another 8 out of 10 girl, they're going to have similar levels of power in the relationship, or maybe that's difficult to quantify.
Probably
but
not.
A certain amount of power, let's say. If he is with a 7 out of 10, she is probably going to give him more power in the relationship. And then 6 out of 10, a greater amount of power, or in some sort of scale. And the question is, like, how much of a differential do you think for you, for example, would get you the relationship that you want?
Yeah, I see things in a slightly different way. I interjected where it's like the 8 man and the 8 woman you suggested have equal power. And I said, no, they don't.
Yeah.
An 8 man and 8 woman, the woman has more power because the average woman has more option than the average man. That woman probably has an 8, tens of thousands of men, especially if she's on social media circulating around her. The men might have thousands. So that's still an order of magnitude difference, right? At a certain point, it might all come out in the wash, but in general, like an 8 man and a 7.5 woman are probably of equal power. And that also speaks to the hypergamous nature of relationships, is that women tend to mate up. Like they'll date across a fellow 8 only as a last ditch plan Z. And most likely they won't have to take it because there's a 9 that is in her DMs, as it were. So I do think that equal is unequal when we compare apples and oranges, the men and women here. When it comes to getting what you want as a man, again, this might sound a little callous, but I think the best that you can hope for as a man is a useful 8, if we're going to be using this system. In my opinion and experience, most women who are more attractive than an 8 are usually more trouble than they're worth for a number of different reasons. Oftentimes these women are precociously attractive, like they became attractive ever since they were teenagers in high school. And so they've been receiving all kinds of preferential treatment from all kinds of men for as long as they can remember. This means that on some level their life has been on easy mode. If I just received offers of money and relationship and travel and meals, would I have gotten a doctorate? Probably not, because what did I want a doctorate for? To be able to afford relationships and travel and meals, et cetera, et cetera. So if I could just get it directly, why would I go through the long and arduous indirect approach of developing my mind or learning a useful vocation or having an agreeable personality or even being funny? A lot of these women at the very highest level, some of them are dumb as rocks. Some of them are extremely entitled. Some of them are women that have never been told no their entire lives, and so they behave like a toddler when that comes up in a conversation. They're also much more likely to be like keen on the game, which is, you know, if you're a top level baseball player, you understand that it's not just about the sport. It's like, I'm bringing in revenue. You know, it's not just tickets. It's like you're selling $100 million worth of my merch with my name on it. Like I'm a huge asset to this company, and it's not just about my RBI. And so they learn to play the game. It's not just about baseball anymore. It becomes about baseball and money and fame and merchandise, etc. And at the highest levels in the sexual marketplace, it's not really about love and compatibility anymore. It becomes about resource acquisition in a very obvious and crass way. So I decide that it's just not worth it to engage with those types of women. I'm sure that there are a few very beautiful, well-adjusted women. They'd have to probably be raised in strict traditional families or cultural contexts. I'm sure they do exist, but again, how long is it going to take you to find them? How many are you going to have to date and access before that happens? When are you looking to get into a relationship or settle down, et cetera, et cetera? So an 8, to my mind, is plenty attractive. It's plenty attractive. It's attractive enough to maintain my sexual interest. And the useful is important because it's like, I want relationships that add value to my life. Like I want my life to be better because of the woman that I invite into it. It shouldn't just be this drain of energy and money and attention. Obviously, relationships and women do take energy and money and attention, but it should feel like I'm getting good ROI on my investment into this particular person or relationship. And a woman who's sufficiently attractive to engage my sexual interest over time and who adds positive value to my life, boom. I mean, what else do you need at some level?
Yeah. So as you said, and I agree with this, the power balance is not equivalent to value. So let's say a 7.5, women gets the same amount of power as an 8 men. What kind of differential would be required to get the relationship that you want? Let's say where you are in the adored position.
Okay, so I'll answer that in 2 ways. I think that you're more likely to get the relationship terms that you want, whether you're a man or a woman, if you have at least 1 point over the person that you're dealing with. Anything less than that, and you probably have to make concessions or it becomes a toss-up. The danger here is that you're not actually dealing with generalized abstractions like sexual marketplace value. I have a whole chapter really dialing in what SMV is in my book, The Value of Others, because it ultimately comes down to the power of you versus the power of me. And power is ultimately always a psychological game. An example I use in the book is that dominance is not about sheer size or mass or physical strength or muscles or stature, because almost everybody has seen a yappy Chihuahua dominating some cowering German Shepherd who in that moment, for whatever reason, has psychologically forgotten that it could bite that little fur in two. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like for whatever reason, the domination happened on the psychic plane and the small dog conquered the large dog. And that's what power is. Power is a dynamic that exists between actual individuals, not generalizable abstract entities, in real time in the psychological plane. And in that way, it's possible for a guy who is a 6 in the normalized sexual marketplace value to dominate a 9 in a woman. I mean, that's like, what did Hugh Hefner do with the Playboys bunnies? And like, he slept in a big bed with 20 girls up until he was in his 80s. You know, I don't think he had a very high sexual marketplace value, even though he was rich, you know, and he had satin robes and a mansion and whatnot. So he had some signifiers of it. But like, clearly there are more attractive men that those women could have been dealing with, but he knew how to dominate women and he kind of collected them on some level, which is weird to say, but women tend to want what other women want. And this is another potential argument for the simultaneous structure that I mentioned earlier. Like you could potentially get 50 years of relationship experience by the time you're 30 if you have 5 simultaneous 1-year relationships with different women, which again, that's a whole lifetime by the time you're reaching the point where you have an advantageous sexual marketplace value as a man, which happens around 30, is that it's impossible. It's impossible to go from being absolutely single and having no options as a man to dating a 9. It will never happen. It will never happen. And the longer that guy is single, the more certain I am that it will never happen, because that guy is going to be so out of practice when it comes to chatting up a girl, seducing her, maintaining frame, leading a relationship, engaging her over time, being a good boyfriend, that he's not going to know what to do with a 9, even if fate dumped one in his lap. So usually women, they don't love the idea that a man is talking to or even dating other women, but on some level, it's safer for them to deal with that guy than the man that no women are dealing with. Like, what's wrong with, like, you don't want to go into a restaurant and be the only person in the restaurant. It's like, I have somewhere else to be. It's like, it feels like maybe the food isn't going to be very good or something. They had food poisoning. I don't know what's happening, but that's not a good signal. You want to go to the place where there's a line, even if it means you have to wait for 2 hours. Because like, I bet the food's going to be good here. You know, it might not be. Those aren't always reliable signals, but it does change our sense of confidence with respect to the quality of the experience. Same thing in relationships, man.
Fast forward, let's say you get a relationship and they're treating you the way that you want to be treated and everything is good.
Awesome.
I think for a lot of guys, the challenge later on is that they end up losing that dynamic. They lose their power. How do men lose power in relationships?
Well, through small concessions and through not having a plan, like I talked about. For a lot of guys, oh great, this woman, she's cute. I like her. She treats me the way I want to. We get to go on dates. We hook up. This is heaven. Like, what more do I really need in this situation? Women often have other plans. It's like, no, we need to, I have a vision that has a shared bank account and a princess ceremony and children, and we have to live together. And it's like she has a whole vision of a life, whereas a guy's just like, this is nice. I like this. So most men don't have a plan past that point, whereas a lot of women do. And again, like I said, if you don't have a plan, you're a part of somebody else's. I call this in the book the attempted hijacking, where the captain or the person who has the frame loses that to the passenger, the one who has less power in a relationship. Sometimes the hijacking occurs as a discrete and obvious event. For example, maybe early on in the courtship process, you had a conversation and you said, hey, I'm not really in a place to have kids right now, maybe one day, but I feel like I have to put my career first, or I'm just not interested. And the woman might say, oh yeah, that sounds reasonable. Okay, I get that. I can handle that. And then like 2 years later, she says, I've changed my mind. I really need to have kids, and I need to have kids now. That's an attempt of hijacking. The man was actually direct and explicit about what he was interested in. The woman said that was not a problem, changed her mind. It's okay. People can change their mind. People's priorities change, and it's inevitable on some level. But now we have to decide, like, who's really running the ship? Is it the man who was like, no, this isn't what I want this relationship to be about? Or the woman who's saying, no, I need it to be about this, and if not, I'm out of here. So she's basically threatening to sink the ship on some level, or at least to remove herself from the ship if she doesn't take control over its destination. And I think in that instance, it's always best for the captain to call the bluff and basically say, I was very explicit about the itinerary. You knew where the ship was headed. I can't let you control the helm because you don't know how this ship works. Like, for the safety of everyone on board, the captain, the one who built the ship, who knows how to sail, should be the one in charge. Otherwise, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but we'll eventually run a shoal somewhere, and I don't want that to happen. So for everyone's good, your good and my good, get the fuck away from the wheel on some level. And if that doesn't work for you, I'm happy to drop you off on the next island with a canteen of water on some level. And that is harsh. And sometimes that means that passenger is going to get off that ship. But again, in most cases, by making concessions out of fear, you're winning to lose on some level. And that ship eventually, what was the point of building the ship and learning to sail if you never get to go to the destination that you want to go to? Like, what a waste. And that's why attempted hijackings occur. It's like, it takes a lot of time and effort to build a ship and learn how to sail. But what if I could just be a passenger and then hijack it? Like, I can get the benefits of building a boat and learning to sail, which is to dictate the destination, without having to build a boat or learn to sail. That's a shortcut. And it works for a lot of women.
Sometimes I feel like it isn't even necessarily like a planned thing, but it more so is the fault of the man, in my opinion, where the guy lets himself go, or he doesn't continue to build himself. And as you said, he doesn't have a plan. So that apathy actually just leads naturally into that setup.
That can certainly happen. I think it can happen on both sides, where it's like, oh, now that I'm in a relationship, I don't have to try to keep you because it's now secure. And both the man and the woman could gain weight. The woman might just not put on makeup anymore and sit around in her sweatpants. It might lead to just low quality interactions with each other all the time, to the point where you feel like a piece of furniture and you're just taken for granted in your own relationship or in your own house. I don't think that's good. In general, both men and women should continue to do the things that were attractive to the other person to begin with, because that's why they chose this person and not any other person that they had access to. And so not showing up in that way threatens the ongoing basis of the relationship in a way that's not very wise. Now, people can leave when the other partner isn't doing well, right? Mm-hmm. For certainly once it becomes a habit. Most people don't want to go down with the ship. Okay? So if one partner is backsliding, if the other person is keeping herself or himself attractive and fit and focused on the career and is engaged with their mental health, et cetera, and the other person is just getting fat and drinking too much, et cetera, that relationship is going to be on the rocks. But what can also be more destabilizing is when one person in the relationship succeeds. It's destabilizing when one partner fails on some level, but it's also destabilizing when one partner succeeds.
Yep.
That might even be more destabilizing than the other one. Because if we're in a relationship, Bill, and you start to go down, maybe I can feel good about that on some level. Like I could be the good helper and stand by you and see you through. And you're the problem, not me. I'm the good, virtuous, self-sacrificial partner, right? It's hard to feel that way when, if we're in a relationship, you start doing way better than me. In fact, it might trigger insecurity. It might trigger my own envy. And let's be honest, your success would probably get you access to more and more attractive potential partners, because that's how it fucking works. That's why people work to become successful, whether they're conscious of it or not, from an Evo Psych perspective. So now the gap is widening and there are new and better options. The relationship is threatened in that way as well. So both people should not only maintain doing the things that stimulated the attraction to begin with, but they should be more or less growth oriented in the same way. Like you can't leave your partner in the dust. That's going to destroy your relationship.
I want to get your thoughts on ultimatums in relationships. I think that this is something that often happens in important points in relationships where a girl will say like, oh, I want us to be exclusive. That's one big event. And then another one would be, let's move in together. Later on, maybe let's get married. What are your thoughts on what it means when a girl proposes an ultimatum?
I don't really think very highly of ultimatums in relationships for a number of reasons. One is I think it sets up and trains a concerning precedent, which is basically like, in order for me to get what I want, at least in the short term, because ultimatums can work, I have to threaten the basis of the relationship. And when a man or a woman caves to an ultimatum, what they're teaching is that the other party is that in order to get what you want, if you really want to get what you want, all you have to do is threaten the basis of the relationship. And I've shown that I will cave. And that makes it more likely, regardless of who you're dealing with, that that kind of threat is going to occur in the future. Because people generally do what works, what is reinforced, regardless of whether they're aware or conscious of how that's being reinforced. So I remember I was in a relationship a long time ago, and I think I'm a pretty good communicator. I'm generally a very even-keeled guy. I don't lose my temper very often. And I was just having this difficulty with this woman, and I talked with her about it like 30 or 40 times from lots of different angles. I tried all these different strategies, and I was just like, I just don't understand why this isn't working, why I'm not getting through to this woman. And then eventually, like, something happened, and I lost my temper, and I yelled, and it's like, you don't fucking listen anymore. And guess what? She listened. Like, she sat up straight, and for the next, several weeks or several months, the behavior was better. Like, the problem was solved. But then it started to creep back in, because for her behavior was not problematic. I had the problem with her behavior. She didn't. That's why she didn't change her behavior. I had the problem. And so she was willing to change her behavior long enough until she saw that I no longer had a problem with it. And then the behavior that wasn't problematic to her returned. And so I thought, oh, this is interesting. Does that mean that I have to perpetually be angry in this relationship? Because I know that being angry worked with this woman, but I don't want to become an angry guy. Like, that's not how I want to live. And whether she knew it or not, she reinforced that part of my personality, which made it more likely that it was going to recur in the future. So I said, this just is a bridge too far. I don't think this is going to work out. And I ended the relationship. So ultimatums often don't work because, one, you're reinforcing bad behavior. You want to reinforce good behavior. You don't want to reinforce somebody who's threatening the basis of the relationship. Let's put it that way. And often it just works until the other person is like reassured that they're getting what they want, and then the behavior returns. If we're talking about I want to get married or I want to have kids, it's still generally not a good idea to give an ultimatum, because if the other person wanted the same thing or was close enough to wanting the same thing, the ultimatum wouldn't have been necessary. Like, you have to give an ultimatum to somebody who doesn't want to do the thing that you want to do. So why the fuck are you want to have a baby with somebody that doesn't want to have a baby with you? Why do you want to get married to somebody who doesn't authentically, organically want that for him or herself? Like, that's a stupid idea. Like, that's not going to be great for your future family. That's not going to be very optimistic for that relationship prospect. Like, the fact that you have to give an ultimatum, to my mind, reveals a radical divergence in what the parties want from the relationship. And rather than try to force it, just let it go and find somebody who actually does want the thing or close enough to the thing that you want, and do business with them.
Something that people have consternation over is that often guys will...
So much consternation in the world. Great word.
Is that guys are often under pressure from the person they're dating to show higher levels of commitment, whether it's, like being exclusive or moving in together, or, as you said, getting married, having kids. And you said that it's not ideal to have an ultimatum come up because basically that's bad behavior. And if you concede at that point, you're rewarding that bad behavior that you don't want. But on the other hand, there's an argument that people will say for not trying to push things too quickly on the guy's end, for example, like with becoming exclusive. Not to say like, oh, will you be my girlfriend very early on, like after just dating a few months. So how do you find a balance between that?
Okay. Well, there are two different things, what you just described. So I'll do the second one first because it's top of mind. In general, I don't recommend that men move the relationship forward in terms of level of commitment. Like, a man should not bring up the define the relationship conversation. There's some reasons for that. It's like women are the gatekeepers of sex, men are the gatekeepers of commitment. Did she make you work for sex? Or did she just hand it out because you wanted it? Did you have to become attractive? Did you have to court her? Did you have to treat her right in order for her to say, yes, you can have access to me in this way? Well, guess what? She's got to do the same thing for you. Like, the very least a man has to do to get sex from a woman is to ask. Otherwise, you're Henry Cavill or something, some sort of like jacked, famous, wealthy movie star. You, as a man, you have to make the effort to get it. Men should allow women to make the effort to get the commitment. And the least amount of effort that they can make is to ask for that commitment. And if they're not willing to even ask for that commitment, then why are you trying to force it on them? That's like a woman trying to force sex on a man who, for whatever reason, doesn't want to fuck her. That's a terrible idea. And this is also a bad idea for the context of the relationship, is that people value what they work for more, especially with women. It's easy come, easy go. If the woman hasn't worked for that level of commitment, she's not going to value it. Mm-hmm. And it's more likely that the first time a bump in the road happens or the crisis of disillusionment occurs and she sees the man behind the fantasy for the first time, she's going to be out the door because she's not really that emotionally invested. What did she sacrifice? She didn't even have to ask. So I do think that it's essential that men wait until the women bring it up. And that's also useful because when a woman brings up the define the relationship conversation, if you as a man want a relationship and you ask her in that moment for one, the answer is going to be yes. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. So if you wait until the woman brings it up, you're like 99.9% likely to get the relationship if that's what you want. What's not to like? Mm-hmm. Now, the other question had to do with, can you remind me?
Yeah, well, basically my question was, there's a spectrum of how long, a guy might wait to have this relationship move forward. Either he can try to spring the question himself very early. He can wait until at some point, she's probably going to bring it up if she wants it. And then if you wait longer, she might bring it up again and again with increasing levels of intensity. And eventually she might give an ultimatum. Maybe. And the question is like, at what point should you give in to a girl's request?
Yeah, it's tricky. So there's a number of different directions I can take with this. Most people working for companies, most people want to be the CEO. How many people get to be the CEO? One person gets to be the CEO. So in the context of a romantic relationship, your CEO is like your wife, your life partner. Like, that is a very high position. It certainly should be a long vetting process before a person is promoted up into that role, especially if you promote up through the company. Like, someone doesn't start at the entry level and become the CEO in a year. That's a terrible business promotion. But people do that in their romantic relationships all the time. The issue is that all the employees want to be the CEO. That doesn't necessarily mean that you go around to all the employees and say, look, you are never going to be the CEO. Like, no matter how hard you work in this position, you might get a promotion or two, but you just don't have executive qualities that I can see. Why don't executives do that? Because those employees are useful in the roles in which they were hired. Like, an entry-level position might be a great entry-level worker. A project manager might be a great project manager, but a bad CEO. Do you see what I'm saying? So if they were hired for a project manager, why do they have to feel like there's a pathway to the CEO? But a lot of employees feel like they have to, even if they don't want to. If you were told that that pathway is closed off to you, they might be like, well, fuck you. I don't want to work at a company that I could never become the CEO at. I might not want that ever, but I want to feel like I could become one if I wanted to. That's going to be tough for a lot of people. So here's the thing. It's like a promotion. If you have a very good worker, ambitious worker, conscientious, diligent, talented, they should rise up the ranks, right? You don't want to keep that person as the entry level forever. Mm-hmm. So there's an art to this as a manager. If you promote too quickly, if you give people everything that they want without them having to sufficiently work for it, well, they're not as invested in the mission, they're not as invested in the company. And what more can they get from you because you've already given them everything that they could want from you? So now you've just made yourself redundant and obsolete. Good job, dude. Like I say in the book, no one continues to pay the plumber. It's like once someone does the job, they don't get paid any longer. So people, it's a real tragedy. It's like people go into relationships to get what they want from other people, but in the act of giving other people what they want, they become less valuable because there's one fewer thing that they can give that the other person wants. So if you give everything that the other person wants too quickly, why do they need to stick around and relate to you? That said, if you're a bad manager, really stingy, and you don't promote and you always say no, and that person never sees like there's a pathway, then generally they're going to get sick and leave and go find another company to work for where it seems like they might be able to have some career progression, and that's fair. And I think that's what employees generally do. If they feel like they've been passed over for a couple of promotions, they typically don't go into the office and give their boss an ultimatum. Not certainly in the language that women often use with their boyfriends. Mm-hmm. They do make it clear that they might need to start looking for other career opportunities, on some level, but they don't say, boss, either you promote me today or I'm out of here. That CEO should never promote that individual because that person is clearly not that committed to the culture, not that committed to the mission. It's a bad fit. They practically have one foot out the door already. Like, I can't bring you closer when you have one foot out the door. That would be a bad business decision. But men do that all the time in their personal relationships. Not a great idea. So the trick to a long-term relationship is to appropriately space out giving the other person what they need. Again, if you give them everything they want too quickly, they don't value the relationship and you're now irrelevant and redundant. If you never give them what they need, or only too rarely, they get too frustrated and they leave. So there's a balance, and it's going to be different for every relationship. That's like, okay, at this point, it's appropriate that you get promoted. You've shown that you are talented, that you're hardworking, that you're committed. And guess what? We want those types of people in the most powerful positions of authority. We want them in our inner circle. That's not a bad person to promote.
I think one phenomenon that happens is that when guys are dating a girl that really likes them, the girl will always want more and more of your time and attention.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So applying your principle, you want to meter how much you level up the amount that you're giving them. But the issue is that at some point there's a limit to how much you can give. So how do you pace that? And then what do you do when, let's say that girl is in the CEO position or is getting a lot of your time and attention?
It's really tough. Sometimes you have to manufacture desires that don't otherwise exist. I mean, this is basically what advertisers figured out a long time ago. There is no natural market for sugary carbonated beverages, and yet Coke sells billions of dollars worth of soda every year. So how did they do that? They manufactured a desire for sugary carbonated beverages that didn't exist. Sometimes you have to do that in your relationships. We did that in our government. I remember during the Great Depression, under the New Deal and FDR's presidency, We had all these workers who were unemployed. And so what did we do? We built the Hoover Dam. We did the Tennessee Valley Authority. There were these big public work projects. Did we really need to dam the Colorado River? Probably not. Certainly not as much as those 50,000 men needed a job, And so we gave them a make work project so that they could get paid, support their family, and have dignity in the sense that they weren't just receiving a handout. Sometimes you have to make work for your partner. Sometimes you have to manufacture desire. And one of the best things that I think in the context of a long-term relationship is to always have something that your partner can look forward to that they haven't gotten from you yet. Because everything that they've been given is theirs. And in some level, it doesn't count anymore. Like love does not run on gratitude. It doesn't. The game doesn't run on gratitude. Attraction doesn't run on gratitude. Gratitude is very rare. And you hear that all the time in dissatisfied relationships that are on the brink of divorce. Like, after all that I've done for you, it's like, yeah, and you did great, but like, I have another 30, 40, 50 years of life left. It's like, I can be appreciative of what you did, but that isn't enough to forgo benefit indefinitely for the rest of my life, potentially. So one way to do that is to control things that your partner still wants that haven't yet received, and if necessary, to manufacture that want in them. I know that sounds a little Machiavellian and manipulative, but I think that's important. You have to keep finding needs to fulfill and desires to satisfy. Mm-hmm. And when those no longer exist anymore, the point of the relationship is gone. And then it's just duty or habit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what would be an example of that? Let's say that we're talking about a couple that's been together for a long time, like 20 years. They're married, they have kids, they live together, they spend all their time together. And let's say they've already been on a lot of vacations together. Sure. They've bought a lot of things together. What kind of things would we be talking about?
Well, this is often what happens is there's often a crisis in a marriage once the kids are launched. So they've been married for 20 years. So let's say they got married, they had 2 kids, and now they're both out of high school, in college. It's like that couple has now fulfilled the mission that they potentially got married to accomplish. They got married, they raised a family, good job. Now what? I'm only 50. 50? I should have been dead 20 years ago, 100 years ago or so. Now I might live for another 50 years, potentially, especially with the advances in health and longevity that are coming down the pipeline. It's like, that's a long fucking time. So what are we going to do? Just like watch Seinfeld reruns? It's like, now the couple has to decide, is there a new mission for this relationship? Is there a new compelling project that we can work together in which we need and want each other present in the fulfillment of that mission? And if they can't come up with that, then generally they either get divorced or they just sort of become pleasant cohabitants, like roommates. And they don't really want or need anything from, it's just sort of like, he's there or she's there and it's fine, everything's fine, and tootle around in the garden, and I have 2 glasses of wine at night, and it's just kind of how it is. And they ride it out, and that could be fine for everybody. So what does that look like? I think it's different for every person, but that's an opportunity. It's like we could rent an RV and then go see all the national parks in America. We can start an animal shelter and found a nonprofit, and that could be our mission. It could be about raising awareness of childhood cancers. Like, it has to speak deeply to the emotional and psychological interests of the individuals involved, and they need to be involved in each other's lives in an important way. Otherwise, it's just going to be pleasant routine until you die, which isn't, I guess, the worst thing in the world, but it's certainly not the best thing.
I think it's particularly challenging nowadays in relationships where the basis of the relationship is desire, right? Where It's just like, we want to be together, so we're going to stay together. And if you don't have something else that's pushing you to stay together, then why do you need to?
Yeah, there are 2 main levers that bring men and women together into sexual relationship. There's need, necessity, and desire. Throughout most of human history, it was necessity that brought men and women together because life was very, very hard, and you kind of needed to work together to survive the winter on some level, right? Most people who have ever lived have lived at a subsistence level of poverty, and life has been extremely difficult. And when you don't have a lot, and when you're closer to survival, you need other people's help. You can't do it alone. You're either a beast or a god if you're self-sufficient under those capacities. So It's necessity that brought people together. And that meant that you didn't have to love your spouse. Not in the sense of like have a positive feeling for it. You didn't even have to like them, in the sense that you can work with people at your job that you don't fucking like. You can hate that dude, but it's like, we're here to do a job. I'm going to focus on my task. I'm going to be professional. And that's how spouses kind of operated. They didn't all hate each other, I imagine, but like it wasn't about love and liking. It was about, we're here to raise a family. We're here to not die on some level. Okay. In the last 100 years, a lot of that necessity has completely disappeared, especially in the Western world, right? So we need each other less. And as a consequence of that, we don't relate to each other as much. Like as GDP increases in every third world country, the birth rate goes down. Like there's not a single exception to that. And the most industrialized countries have the lowest birth rates. The lowest birth rate right now is South Korea, a highly industrialized society, right? So when we take away necessity, one of the two fulcrums for relating disappears. Dangerous for relationships. Mm-hmm. Maybe better for society or the individuals. Like I'd rather not live at a subsistence level under the thumbscrew of necessity, but there you go. And so in the absence of necessity, there's desire. So if I don't need you, I have to want you. And if I don't need you or want you, get the fuck out of here. Like, why would I go through the sacrifices and inconveniences of relating to you? Because you're going to be a pain in the ass at least some of the time, right? So nowadays, in the absence of necessity, most relationships are based on desire, and desire is a fickle thing. It can vanish in an instant sometimes. That's why some women go to sleep with their makeup on and wake up before their husbands get out of bed. Like, those men have never seen what that woman's true face looks like. There are women, millions of women today that still behave that way. Mm-hmm. Because men's desire is actually fickle. It's probably not as fickle as a woman's desire, but I think men are inappropriately characterized as just being dogs that would fuck anything with a pulse. And it's like, no, that's not how male sexuality works. And men can see something and it can so turn them off that it completely sours the sexual fantasy of that woman and the desire is dead. It's not fair. It is what it is. So, and we also know that desire, it's not like, we also know from the research that men continue to desire 23-year-old girls, 22-year-old girls, right? Women's desire tends to age with them in terms of the partners that they're most attracted to. Men's desire is fixed at young women. And so it's harder to maintain desire as a woman as you age. It's not impossible, but you have to move more towards emotional and psychological stimulation as opposed to pure physical or visual, sensual stimulation. And that's what the successful women do. And some of them are really good at it. Really good at it. Like some older women are super hot and sexy, not because of their bodies. Their bodies probably can't compete with the 22-year-olds, but because they figured out how to tap into men's sexual desires. Mm-hmm. And they're much more liberated in that respect than the average 23-year-old who can be really uptight about sex.
Switching gears to some other issues in relationships, what's the role of jealousy?
Well, it does seem to be a fairly universal emotion. It's not one of the 6 that were identified as pure universal emotions, which means that there's probably some communal tribes in the Amazon rain basin or Papua New Guinea that never showed any kind of expression of jealousy. And so there probably is a strong biological component to jealousy, but it seems to be a little bit more evolved or cultural than, let's say, anger or sadness or surprise are some of the primary emotions that you see in like Inside Out. Like jealousy was not one of the emotions there. It's a complex emotion. I think evolutionarily it makes sense. It must be a more recently evolved emotion because it certainly wouldn't make sense in societies where there was no monogamy. Like if in most tribal situations, as far as we can tell, like they didn't even know that sex made babies on some level. Like there's probably some tribes that exist that still don't understand that. And even when they do, they don't necessarily know who the father is because that was 9 months ago. Actually, it probably took a long time for human beings to figure that out. I mean, like something I did 9 months ago made that human? Gee, I didn't even think about that. That's wild. So, and they don't have nuclear families or monogamous relationships. And so it's impossible to determine the paternity. And in fact, I think they talk about this in Sex at Dawn. There are some cultures that when the woman becomes pregnant, all the men chip in their semen to make the baby even stronger. It's like all the virtues of every man in the society get imbued into this gestation period so that we get a little bit of the best of everybody involved. Like that's a standard practice in some tribes. And if you lived in that tribe, it would not be to your benefit to be jealous. Like if you were jealous of one particular woman in a tribe that practiced communal partner swapping, you would be thrown out by the other guys who weren't. You're like too much of a pain in the ass. In the same way that like hoarding food in those societies is punishable by exile or death. That's everybody's food. You don't get your own food. What are you talking about? Like you don't get your own woman. That's everybody's woman. What are you talking about? So I gotta believe that jealousy is a more recently evolved emotion because we know that monogamy is a more recent invention. It seems to really have started around the agricultural revolution as far as we can tell. So I think traditional, which is still a long time ago, and I think Evo Psych says that jealousy it's a form of mate guarding in order to signal threats to a valued relationship and also to kind of secure paternity, especially in men, because men can never be 100% sure that their children are theirs, certainly before DNA tests and whatnot, whereas a woman always is, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I think that became more important. This is now more of a sociological interpretation. Why would it be important for a man to know that his children were his? Because of private property and inheritance laws, is that I want to make sure that my wealth stays in my patrilineage, which wouldn't even make sense in the more communal tribes from which we evolved.
Mm-hmm. To what extent do you think jealousy is healthy or unhealthy in a relationship?
I think jealousy is not always a bad thing, but you have to understand that jealousy is a spice, and it's like a Thai spice. A little bit of spice makes food taste better. Like the British conquered entire nations just so that they get access to their spices. Because have you tasted British food? Like it's awful. I wouldn't want to eat it either. So they sailed halfway around the world to get some cumin. All right. That's how powerful spice can be. People will do all kinds of crazy things to spice things up. But if there's too much spice, there's too much heat, then you can't even taste the food anymore. And now your mouth is just on fire, and that's not a pleasant experience to have. So a little bit of jealousy is probably a healthy, delicious spice to a relationship, but it needs to be used with discernment and in moderation, especially because jealousy, especially sexual jealousy, is like the number one predictive factor of domestic violence in heterosexual relationships. Like there was a study that David Buss talked about in The Evolution of Desire, where they went and interviewed hundreds of women at women's shelters after suffering domestic violence. And they found that 96 or 97% of them admitted that jealousy was part of the reason for the escalating conflict that led to the violence. So men and women tend to get jealous about different things. For men, any kind of sexual jealousy in their woman can stimulate a powerful jealousy that can be overwhelming and dangerous for both parties. So you have to be careful.
Yeah. So from a practical experience point of view, let's say someone's in a relationship, what might be some signs of a healthy type of jealousy versus something that's too controlling?
Well, so just based on what I said, so if a little jealousy might be good, but if a woman actually like flirts a little too much with another guy or even does something physical or sexual with another man, it can stimulate this really dangerous, violent jealousy in a partner. So how does a woman add spice to a relationship? Well, one way to do that is just to look fucking good as a woman, is like take care of your body, dress sexy, and then go out. It's like the man is going to know that other men are going to be checking her out, that she looks good. That's enough. That's enough of a cue that woman is still operating with some sexual optionality in the marketplace. And that's going to be a goad for him to be on his game and to show up in his masculinity and his with his presence as well. So a little bit goes a long way. They don't actually have to flirt with other men. They can just look really good. And that guy is going to know, oh shit, if I know some other guy is going to jump on this if I'm not careful. And that's enough of a jealousy goad.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of gone overblown nowadays with this I mean, with how broad the internet is, you have these circles nowadays of people promoting these like manipulative strategies and like playing games,
like what?
ultimately intentionally like flirting with someone else in front of you to try to ignite that energy. And I think that people take it too far a lot of the time, that you don't really need to go out of your way. And especially if you're dealing with someone who's aware of what's going on and it's like, hey, I like see you're trying to do something here.
Well, then it feels just really nasty because they're trying to provoke something. It's not even an authentic thing. It does really feel manipulative there. The tricky thing is that some women, not all women, but some women see a man's lack of jealousy or possessiveness to be a sign of his low interest in her or the relationship. And that's not true. And so some women women test men all the time in all kinds of different ways. And some women test men for their level of investment by attempting consciously to provoke jealousy inside of them to see if he actually responds in that way. I remember that same woman I was talking about before where I got angry. We had some sort of disagreement. And so her solution was to put on a short skin tight dress and high heels and her makeup. And she says, well, I'm going to go out tonight. And I'll be like, okay, that's fine. She's like, you're going to let me go out like this? And I was like, if that's how you want to dress, I'm not going to try to control you. And I had like a zero reaction. And she looked just like disappointed. And she just like took her outfit off and she never left. But it's like she was clearly trying to get something out of me. Some sort of fear that I might lose her, because I guess in that moment she was feeling undervalued or she was insecure about the foundation of the relationship. But it was such a ham-fisted attempt at provoking that jealousy that it just backfired for her.
How should you deal with insecurity in a relationship? Like, let's say you're seeing signs of it.
In yourself or in your partner?
In your partner.
I mean, it's tough, man. Just kind of get a partner who's not insecure, I would say. I know that sounds callous, but at this stage of the game, I think that 90% of successful relationships is selection. And it's going to be very difficult to have a loving, stable, fulfilling relationship with a person who's insecure for whatever reason. A person who's insecure is like a bucket with a hole in the bottom. You can put all the love and reassurance and affirmation in that bucket, is just going to fucking drain out, because that person needs to feel good about him or herself. If the entire world believed in him or her, but they didn't, it would be irrelevant. By the same token, if they believe in themselves and the whole world didn't, it would also be irrelevant. Self-efficacy, self-belief, self-confidence, self-esteem, those things cannot be created through external validation, reinforcement, or support. And the problem occurs not only when you have an insecure partner, but when you have a partner who thinks that, oh, I can make this person feel secure. And you can't. Like, you can't fill up a bucket with a hole in it. And so nothing continues to work. And eventually the person who's giving and giving and giving feels burnt out, feels resentful, feels like, fuck it. Like, no matter what I do, I don't seem to get anywhere. They might as well have just broken up at the first signs of insecurity to begin with. Because again, insecurity is not healed through reassurance. It's healed internally by doing whatever therapeutic work, whether it's with a counselor or not, some therapeutic work to heal that wound, that hole. Like, you have to plug the hole, and that has to be plugged. It's an inner hole. It has to be plugged on the inside. It can't be plugged on the outside.
I think that speaks to a problem that a lot of guys run into, is they choose a person that they want to be in a relationship with, and then they just ignore all the red flags or any other issues that may cause problems.
Usually because she's hot too. Let's just be honest, especially if he's young. Yeah, that's a big problem. They decide that they want the relationship with that person before they even fucking know who that person really is. And I've made that mistake before, and I made that mistake again because the women were very attractive. Like, men are stupid dumb about that shit. I'm less dumb about that now. I don't think it ever goes away completely, but thank God, right? So that's really silly. I think that you have to, men and women should kind of keep their cards a little closer to their chest, adopt a kind of wait and see attitude for at least the first 6 to 12 months of the courtship process, because you need about that much time for the other person to kind of relax his or her personas, to get enough data points across a number of different contexts to kind of figure out, who am I truly dealing with, to allow the fantasy of who you thought that person was or wanted them to be to shatter and fall, so that you can see the other person in the relationship more clearly. And then if it's like, oh, I feel good around this person, I like spending time with this person, we're aligned with where we want to go, okay, then I will cautiously begin to invest more and more in the relationship. And you can't do that if you've already gone all in because she's hot. Sorry, bro, it's just not possible.
Yeah, I think it takes a certain amount of objectivity that guys need early on in relationships, where I think it's really hard to be willing to sacrifice the relationship if things are going south, and if you can see that if you stay in this relationship or concede to whatever demands, that you're not going to have the relationship that's going to work out in the end.
It's much easier to do that if you have options. It's much easier. Like, why try to get a problematic employee to file their paperwork on time or to make fewer errors, like when you have 100 people who are chomping at the bit to take over that role? Like, that, more than anything else, it's not objectivity, it's optionality that prevents people from putting up with incompetent, bad, or dysfunctional relationships, whether they're professional or personal. Doesn't mean you have to act on that optionality, but you absolutely have to know that you can get someone else to fill that position if necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's unique and everybody's replaceable. Those two things are true at the same time. Mm-hmm. Everybody is unique and everyone is replaceable.
Touching on something related, why do people cheat, and are the reasons different for men and women?
Yeah, the reasons are very different, right? Do you already know them? Are you kind of setting me up?
Familiar.
What did you hear?
Well, people will say that for men, a big reason is the desire for variation or something different, or just someone who's physically attractive or potentially more physically attractive. Or for both sides, I think if they're dissatisfied in a relationship, people often say for women that a lot of it is because of an emotional need, that like they don't feel emotionally stimulated with their partner. People might say that they're trying to go for a better option in terms of their mating pool.
Some of those things I agree with. A couple of things I would have a different perspective on. So let's talk about that. I do think that men and women do tend to cheat for different reasons. The main difference between men and women's cheating behavior is that women cheat when they're dissatisfied with the relationship. Men don't. Like, according to the research I've read, there's no statistically significant difference in relationship satisfaction between the men who cheat and the men who don't. Like, the men who cheat are 18% of them are dissatisfied, and the men who stay are 19% are dissatisfied. Like, it's not a difference. Whereas with women, it's like a 30-point difference. Like, women cheat because they are not happy in the relationship. Men, it doesn't make sense to some women, or maybe they don't want it to make sense, but I've heard from so many men, and I believe them, they say, I love my wife and I fuck this woman. Like, the two things do not contradict each other. Like, I can love my wife and cherish her and her being and our marriage and our relationship, and I can have sex with another woman. For better or for worse, it seems that men have a higher rate of compartmentalization around these types of relationships. They can kind of keep them more separate, and they're more likely to be able to divorce emotion from pure sexual satisfaction. And I do think a lot of that has to do why men cheat is just sexual novelty and diversity, which is a big part of, it's a big stimulus to male desire in a way that it's really not in women. They have a name for that. It's called the Coolidge effect, right? So I do think that men more or less cheat, not because they're dissatisfied, but because they can, and there's an opportunity to satisfy sexual desire in a novel context. One thing I would disagree with you about what you said is that the woman is hotter. Most of the time, she's not. Most of the time that the woman that the man is cheating on his wife on is not as hot as the wife. That's crazy, but let's think about it. In order for a man who has that kind of sexual optionality to marry a woman, that woman needs to be the hottest that he can get, given the type of relationship structure that he would prefer. Like, if a man has sexual optionality, he can enter into a monogamous relationship, but under the condition that the one that he chooses is more attractive than all the other women that he could potentially have a non-exclusive relationship with. He's not going to enter an exclusive relationship with a less attractive woman in that group, right? So generally, the men who have sexual optionality, which are generally the men who cheat, their wives are pretty good. They're pretty sexy. Maybe they're good partners and spouses as well, maybe excellent mothers. And sometimes, James Sexton talked about this, you see the women that the guys cheated on the wife with, and you're like, what was this guy thinking? And there could be a number of reasons why men cheat down. Women can also cheat down. We'll talk about that in a second. But men cheat down not because, well, there's two main reasons. One is that sexual confidence is not the same thing as like sexual attractiveness. There are some very physically attractive women who are not very sexually confident. And there's some women who, just if you look at their bodies or their faces, not that attractive, very sexually confident. Like, it's the way that they carry themselves. It's a vibe, it's an energy, it's enchanting. And it's almost like a spell. It can make a man think that a woman is far more attractive than she actually is because of the way that she carries herself and presents herself. Poise, absolutely. And that's something that women can learn to do. It's a behavior, or a suite of behaviors. The other thing is that maybe that woman does things that the wife won't. It's like there are sexual acts or services that are on the menu in the side relationship that are off the table in the marriage. It could also be that the other woman makes the man feel in a way that the wife no longer does or never did, to be honest. That could also be why women cheat down. Like, sometimes the wife is married to a successful man and a good father, and she cheats with the pool boy, or with like this guy who's got 3 different kids by 3 different baby mamas or something like that. It's like, what the fuck? What's going on there? Well, in general, people want everything. People are greedy, right? And so if you have stability, if you have love, if you have security, if you have family, you don't need any of those things. What you might need in that case is excitement, is danger, is stimulation, is passionate love. And maybe the unstable, unreliable, irresponsible men are going to be more likely to give that to a married woman than her husband. So in general, the other person tends to embody aspects that are missing from the primary relationship. If the primary relationship is very safe and stable and secure, the other person is generally risky and dangerous. By the same token, if the marriage is high conflict and there's a lot of drama, then the other woman or the other man could be like a safe harbor. It might not even be sexual. It just becomes like an emotional place for me to rest and be seen in a way that I don't think I'm recognized by my spouse. So people kind of create this Frankenstein situation where they're getting something from this relationship, other unmet needs from this other relationship, until they kind of more or less get most of their needs and desires met over multiple relationships. And that's generally why people cheat.
If a guy is trying to screen different options for dating, what are potential signs that someone might be a cheater?
So this is a man trying to find out if a woman is going to cheat.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's easy to find out right away.
Like, hard to predict.
Yeah. I mean, if she's cheated in the past, it's probably more likely that it's going to happen in the future. But again, like we talked about earlier, past relationships are not necessarily a predictor of future behavior. Every financial analyst will tell you that, right? Like, you have to roll the dice. Just because the market had been going up, no one was prepared for, or very few people were prepared for the crashes of the last month or so. So I think you get signals over time as the relationship starts to change. Like, for instance, I personally think it might be a concerning sign if after a woman gets involved in a committed relationship that she continues to have an open public Instagram account, especially if she's posting certain types of content on that channel, because it seems like she's still continuing to market herself even though she's ostensibly taken herself off the market. And she'll probably deny that. I like doing this. It's for my girlfriends, etc. Well, you can still do, then why is it public? Like, you can do it for your friends and family, and generally they balk at that. So I think that's a concerning sign. Nothing is a guarantee. But again, most people cheat when they have optionality and when they have the opportunity, and women cheat when they're dissatisfied.
Yeah, Instagram is the #1 dating app nowadays.
I think, absolutely. Yeah. That's why I said, from dating apps to cold approach to social circle to social media. Social media is the best way to meet women in 2025. The more attractive women, like I was saying earlier, are often more in the game Less attractive women, for better or for worse, and it's generally for better, can like get into relationships for love. And because I like this person and I want to have a family. A lot of attractive women start that way, but unbidden and unrequested, they start getting offers for first class tickets to Dubai and opportunities to fly on the Concorde to go to this Michelin restaurant in Paris. And after a few years of that, it's not enough to just have love in a contented relationship. Like, they're in the game. And so these types of women, in my opinion, are more likely to cheat or to jump ship when a significantly better offer comes along, because they're kind of used to that way of relating to men.
Yeah, I think that ties back to something you said earlier about how maybe the girls who are 9s and 10s are not always the ones you want, because they've been given this treatment that isn't conducive to a normal life. Like, I remember I was talking to this girl who had all these photos of being on private jets, and it's like, that's just not realistic for most normal guys.
Yeah, and even if a normal guy is fortunate enough to get into a relationship with that type of women, he has to have insane levels of confidence, because that kind of woman and the attention that she would continue to receive would make most men feel very insecure and very jealous. Even if she doesn't act on it. It's just sort of like, that guy on some level knows that she could do better. And sometimes when men feel that, they go down a dark place and they attempt to control and intimidate the woman, because they're afraid that if she were just to follow her own positive emotions and best interests, she would leave him. And she might be right. And he might be right.
What are your thoughts on that, about very attractive people getting into relationships where people might say someone's only as loyal as their options? They say like these movie star people just can't be loyal.
Some of them seem to be able to be loyal. Not all of them. I think there's probably less loyalty among Hollywood movie stars than in the general population. But there's disloyalty in the general population. There's loyalty in Hollywood celebrity couples as well. So what was your question about this? Sorry.
Do you think there's that it's not really feasible for very, very attractive people?
Oh, people are as loyal as their options, basically, is what you said. Yeah, I mean, I've said that in more or less words a couple of times already. I think over a long enough timeline with sufficiently good options and enough opportunity, most people will be tempted. Yeah. But most people don't have good options or opportunity. And that's one form of mate guarding, is you just take up your partner's time and you shack up in their house. It's like, there's no place for those other bitches to hide, you know. I know you're not doing anything because you're in the house every single night. I have us booked on Monday and we have a dinner on Tuesday and we're going to go see Marta on Wednesday. It's like, that's kind of a form of mate protection. You don't give them opportunity. You can either control their optionality or you can control their opportunity. Mm-hmm. There's a few other ways as well.
Mm-hmm. It's a great conversation, Orion.
Bill, it's been wonderful. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah. Tell us about your book and your group.
Oh, sure. So if people like what they heard here, they can follow me on Psychhacks. That's my YouTube channel. There's links to all the other services that I offer there. I do individual one-on-one paid consultations. I have a book called The Value of Others. There's an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. You can find it on Amazon. It talks about my economic model of sexual relationships. So it's a really deep dive into why people get and end up with the people that they do. I think it's fairly objective and comprehensive. I'm pretty proud of the book. I have a free weekly newsletter. I write original content for that every week. People can sign up on my website. And I have a paid member community called the Captain's Quarters, where I host bi-monthly live group consultations and bring on invited guests that the community can ask questions to and receive answers from. It's a lot of fun. It's a really supportive and energetic group. I think that's about it for now.
What else do they get in the group?
Well, so far they get the group consultations, they get the invited guest Q&As, they get the supportive community. There's a lot of chatter on the posts. There's live chat and so forth and so on. And people are starting to form communities of support. Like, the level of engagement on the posting is incredible. And I think it's generally a very supportive environment for inquisitive and curious people about relationships and about reality and so forth and so on. just for seekers and for high achieving people.
Yeah, I think finding that community, especially for people, as you mentioned, like high achievers, is difficult because you don't meet each other that often in person. And it's like a lot of these topics are things that are difficult to talk with people unless you really trust them, if you've known them for a while, or unless you have this shared interest.
I think so. Some of this stuff is still a little fringe or controversial. So it might be difficult to find people in your environment who are knowledgeable about it or who are at least willing to learn. Some people have already made up their minds about how the world is and how relationships should be, and they're not going to change their minds anytime soon.
Yeah, so I'll put those links in the description below. Thanks for
Bill.
being on the show.
Thank you.